Join Linwood Jackson every Sunday from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. for the all-new Linwood Jackson Radio Show on WFAI 1510 AM. Every Sunday, Linwood will tackle the issues close to your heart, from civil rights and politics to community affairs around the First State and the nation. Linwood speaks on the issues facing citizens in our area on a weekly basis, but his show is so much more. Linwood will talk about his passions, such as dancing and traveling the world and helping people broaden their horizons while embracing different cultures. That's the Linwood Jackson Radio Show, every Sunday from 2 p.m. to 3 p.m. on the all-new WFAI 1510 AM.
Picket lines, a picket signs, don't punish me with brutality. Talk to me so you can see what's going on, what's going on, what's going on. I'll tell you what's going on.
All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. You're listening to the Linwood Jackson Radio Show. I'm Linwood Jackson, your host. I want to open the show with this letter that's a little long, but please bear with me because I'm going to go right to our guest, our first guest after I read this. I believe it's a perfect segue. It's a letter it's titled Death Penalty Repeal is Smart on Crime by Christian Froelich. And it was dated March 4th, 2014. It was sent in to the Cape Gazette of villagesoup.com, and I just want to share it with you guys. I am writing in response to the February 2nd letter from the law enforcement chiefs who oppose Senate Bill 19 to repeal Delaware's death penalty and replace it with life without parole. I want to correct several misconceptions in this letter as to the reasons our coalition supports Senate Bill 19 and the facts related to Delaware's death penalty. As the current president of Delaware Citizens Opposed to the Death Penalty, the sister of a murder victim, and a former healthcare employee at Baylor's Women Correctional Institute, I can assure you that the coalition of community and faith organizations in the Delaware Repeal Project supports repeal for many of the same reasons that the law enforcement chiefs oppose it. We support law and order. We support the needs of crime victims. We support the safety of law enforcement and corrections officers. We support the need for accountability and punishment. In the years since, I have been studying the death penalty since the murder of my brother and 4 of his friends in 1995. I have learned that the death penalty not only does not do justice to those issues, it actively undermines them through unintended consequences, even in Delaware. I experienced firsthand the way the capital case of my brother's killer re-victimized our family. The death penalty was mysteriously dropped during the trial, reinforcing our sense that we were pawns rather than central figures in the process. Delaware's death penalty is just as uncertain. Cornell University Law School published a report in 2012 on their study of Delaware's death penalty between 1977 and 2012. They found that more than a third of all individuals sentenced to death in Delaware during that period under study eventually were resentenced to life imprisonment. The expensive policy failed more than a third of the time, with nothing more to show for it than what we would have had by pursuing life without parole in the first place. Victims' family members who were promised in execution had the rug pulled out from under them, just as my family did. I want to assure you that we are not accusing judges, juries, or law enforcement officers of misconduct. The racial bias reported by our coalition refers to additional findings by the Cornell University Law School study. They found that black defendants who kill white victims are more than 6 times as likely to receive the death penalty as are black defendants who kill black victims. Moreover, black defendants who kill white victims are more than 3 times as likely to be sentenced to death as are white defendants who kill white victims. This is a systematic issue that starts well before the trial begins. We don't believe it is the specific intention of any individual to behave in a biased manner. The cost savings of replacing the death penalty with life without parole goes far beyond reducing appeals. The money in capital cases starts flowing faster than in life without parole cases as soon as the decision is made to pursue the death penalty. Costs include more money for additional attorneys, additional experts, additional time for jury selection, and 2 trials, one for conviction and one for sentencing, rather than one. At least 12 states have studied the cost of the death penalty versus life without parole. All of them have found that the death penalty costs significantly more, and there is no evidence it improves public safety. Maryland estimates that the average cost to taxpayers for reaching a single sentence is $3 million. $1.9 million more than the cost of a non-death penalty case. This includes investigation, trial, appeals, and incarceration costs. That is one reason why they appealed their death penalty last year. We want public dollars to go where they will prevent murders rather than pouring money needed elsewhere to kill those who are already off the streets and in custody. We want money to go towards solving cold cases because we believe murders still on the streets are more dangerous than those already behind bars. Your letter refers to the delicate line between a civilized society and anarchy. The many unsolved murders in Wilmington and elsewhere in Delaware indicate that we are already starting to cross the line into anarchy, and that is with a death penalty that is actively used. The Death Penalty Information Center keeps statistics of executions and death sentences. Delaware remains among the most frequent users of the death penalty. Delaware has been rated 3rd in the nation for executions per capita and 5th in the nation for death sentences per capita. What is our frequent use of the death penalty getting us? As of 2012, according to FBI statistics, Delaware had the 8th highest murder rate in the country. Having a death penalty did not protect Lieutenant Scabrera, that's Szzerba, or Patrolman Spicer. What is our active use of the death penalty costing us? We believe that it takes resources from programs that can actually reduce violent crime in Delaware and protect law enforcement officers. We appreciate the value of the life and work of each law enforcement officer and each corrections officer. We understand that every loss of those lives is a tragedy that affects not only the family, but their fellow officers and the society that they worked to serve and protect. We would rather prevent the death of a police officer by spending scarce resources on better staffing, training, and equipment that will actively protect officers than on the death sentence after the murderer is already in custody. As to honoring those who have been murdered, after the murder of my brother, I learned that tying the value of his life to the fate of his killer was a dangerous bet. My family found better ways to remember, value, and honor his life without having to focus on the fate of his killer and an execution that never came. With life without parole, we could focus more on my brother's life and not always on his murder or the fate of his killer for years to come. The information that our coalition promises is detailed on their website at enddeathpenaltydelaware.org, along with corresponding references. I urge you to take a look. Better yet, invite you to sit down with us to discuss the concerns we have in common and how we can make Delaware smart on crime together. By Christian Foley, Board President, Delaware Citizens Opposed to the Death Penalty. I wanted to get that letter out there real quick because it leads right into my guest today on the show. I thought it'd be a perfect segue. My guest today is I'm honored to be speaking with one of the world's leading and sought-after speakers on abolishing or repealing the death penalty, an advocate for those who are marginalized. She is a Catholic nun and the author of Dead Men Walking, an eyewitness account of the death penalty in the United States, which tells the story of time she spent with death row inmates. It was nominated for a Pulitzer Prize, has risen to #1 on the New York bestseller list, and has been translated into other languages. The story is made into an extraordinary movie of the same name, Dead Man Walking. The film, starring Susan Sarandon and Sean Penn, went on to win an Academy Award and was nominated for Oscars in 4 categories. Ladies and gentlemen, please have in the studio Sister Helen Prejean And also joining us is Abraham Bonowitz. Abraham is a member of the Delaware Repeal Project, a team who handles a variety of tasks. He has been working with Sister Helen for nearly 25 years. He was an extra in the film Dead Man Walking, standing next to Susan Sarandon in the same scene that the real Sister Helen is also an extra. These are two dynamic voices of experience on the issue of repealing the death penalty in Delaware, and their message today is tell your representatives that Senate Bill 19 deserves a vote. Sister Helen, Brother Abraham, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Linwood. I'm so glad to be here.
We're all glad to be here, and thank you for having us on again.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. I'm looking forward to talking to you guys. Sister Helen, you came to Delaware for a series of events in October, somewhere around 5 months ago. You came together with political, nonprofit leaders, religious leaders to share an important message. What brought you back to Delaware today on this trip?
First of all, because I love the people of Delaware. Y'all are friendly folks, good folks. And I love having the conversation about the death penalty. I travel all around the United States. I do a lot of speaking with all kinds of different audiences and universities and civic groups and churches and synagogues. And so I'm here because this is a prime time for Delaware, and I think Delaware is poised, as I put it, to knock the volleyball right over the net, because you have 6 states all around you that have already done away with the death penalty. Maryland did, New Jersey did, and New Hampshire's pretty poised, I think, to do it too. And I think it's time for Delaware. Plus, the way you practice it, Linwood, I mean, your rate of execution is higher than my state, Louisiana, in the Deep South. Y'all do people faster here. And the racism in it, it's just not bringing Delaware forward in any kind of way. And so the time to have the conversations now, and that's why I'm back.
Great. Well, we're glad to have you here as well. We need all the help we can get working on this. Now, as part of your advocacy against the death penalty, you pointed out the profile of the people on death row who are actually executed, saying that the vast majority are poor and responsible for killing white people. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
Sure. And I'm going to put it in contrast to the criterion that the Supreme Court of the United States said we're supposed to be following in picking out who's going to die in this country. They said that it's only supposed to be for the worst of the worst. And then we find out, well, who are the 1,300 people who have been killed and who are the 3,000 plus sitting on death row. We find out they're all poor. Close to 80% or 75% of them are on death row because they kill white people. And it's almost always in the geographical locations of former slave states where it's all happening. So how is it that the worst of the worst, 8 out of every 10 times, ends up only when white people are killed? When people of color are killed, unless it's a mass shooting or it's a black policeman, it's not even a blip on the radar screen. So how do we determine worst of the worst, and who are the determiners?
You know, the attorney generals for the states determine if a case is tried as a capital punishment case. How many of the attorney generals in America are black? You have any idea?
I know the Attorney General, Eric Holder, is. I don't know of any others, to tell you the truth. I don't. Abe, do you know any of them?
It's not been on my radar to check that out.
But I know this, Linwood, over 90% of the whole criminal justice system, the judges, the bailiffs, the lawyers, the prosecutors are all white. It's still a very much white dominant system.
Right. Actually, I think it's less than 1% of attorney generals that are minority in the country. Now, the Supreme Court admitted that race plays a part in the administration of who gets the death penalty. They said, but it would be too costly to a system to remedy it. Would you like to weigh in on that?
I think that is a horrible decision. And, you know, the studying I've done of Supreme Court cases, the Supreme Court is usually as racist or is behind the people in it, because they had done this really elaborate, costly, thorough study of murders in Georgia, Linwood.
Yes.
And they looked at like 70 variables. Was it a particularly terrible crime and all that, and came out definitively showing, without a doubt, that it was the race of the victim that was the big determining factor when you got the death penalty or not. And for the Supreme Court of the United States, this happened in the McCluskey decision, somewhere in the mid-'80s.
That's right.
Where they said there's no doubt that race plays a role in the application of the death penalty, but it'd be too costly to remedy it. That's like saying, we know it's racist, but we're not going to have a remedy for it. You know, when they found that race played a part in employee discrimination, housing discrimination, where you look, that's why we study sociology. That's why we look at patterns of things in our society so that we can move forward. And they decide. But when it came to administering the death penalty, the ultimate punishment of death, we said we're not going to do anything about it.
So to put a Delaware face on this, you know, you've got a vast majority of victims of murder in this state are people of color, mainly black, and yet 70% of the death sentences are issued for killing a white victim. So it's very much like what Sister Helen's talking about nationwide. In fact, 80% of all the people who've been executed so far since 1976, 77, when we resumed executing people, 80% of their cases have been for the murder of white people, even though victims of murder in this country are people of color more than 50% of the time. And it's in some states, like in Maryland and Delaware, it's much higher than 50%. And in Delaware, black defendants who kill a white victim are 6.5 times more likely to receive a death sentence than a black defendant who kills a black victim. And this disparity is worse than states like Georgia, South Carolina, Virginia, you know, which are other high-use death penalty states. So we've got a system that's really not living up to the words that are carved into the face of the U.S. Supreme Court building, equal justice under law.
You're absolutely right. Delaware's death penalty is among the worst in the nation. Delaware ranks third per capita for executions, has the highest minority population on death row in the country, and lays claim to one of the broadest statutes nationwide. And make it so bad, Delaware ranked Wilmington with the third highest homicide rate in the nation for a city its size a few years ago. So there's proof right there that the death penalty does not work to deter crime in Delaware. And we also have a very high school dropout rate in Wilmington. Our state allows 16-year-olds to quit school in the 10th grade, and it should be required that the law be changed. We know that most people who are incarcerated are undereducated, and you think we'd be advocating more for education instead of incarceration.
Yeah, exactly. And Linwood, if I could add just something on this deterrence thing. See, when we went into the death penalty in 76, Supreme Court put it back. The crime rate had been rising, and I'm sure that was one of the reasons. And when you think of the thinking of it, well, what could deter somebody better than thinking, ooh, I better not kill this person or the witnesses because I could get the death penalty? Because self-preservation, isn't that the strongest thing of all in human beings? And so we just thought for sure that would have to be a deterrence. Well, 25 years later or down the road, when you look at the track records of the states that have used the death penalty the most, you find that, now this is a rough figure, but roughly the homicide rate is double that of states that don't have it. And the police chiefs have been asked that twice. They've been given a list of 10 remedies to say, list what you think would be the best to end violent crime in your state or in your city, and they all put the death penalty dead last because they said usually when people do crimes, they don't even think they're going to get caught.
And without a homicide unit, I think they would have a reason to believe that. Why do you wrote somewhere that you think execution should be made public? Why is that, Sister Helen?
Well, you see, I've accompanied 6 people. I've watched executions, been witnesses to what it really means for the state to kill people, what it really means for guards that are just good people with a job that are told, now go take that live man out of that cell, walk him down that hall, strap him down, and kill him. And I came out of the execution chamber after the very first man I ever witnessed executed. It was April the 5th, 1984. He had been killed in the electric chair. And it was the middle of the night, so it's behind prison walls. It's in the middle of the night or it's in the morning, but people don't see it. And I vomited. I threw up As soon as they got me outside those prison gates, and I remember thinking then, and it's affected the rest of my life, Linwood, if the people could get close to see this, they're never going to see this. This is a secret ritual. And I've been brought in to be a witness, so I got to tell the story. And that's why I've been working to do the book, write the books, 2 books I've written, and they have the film, and Tim Robbins has written a stage play, and why I get out and do talks. See, I don't do lectures, Linwood. What I do is I tell stories, and I bring people to each of the parts of the story, just like you do in a drama, because people got to get close to it to see the suffering of the victims as well as the suffering of the one and their family that's going to be executed.
And that's why I like what you have your theater project going on, Dead Man Walking School Theater Project. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, Tim Robbins he's the only playwright in the United States I know. You know, he's a movie director, he's an actor, he does a lot of things. He's also a playwright. He's the only playwright I know that did a play and turned it over to the young people of the country to do. And Tim Robbins has said, we're going to turn this over to high schools and universities throughout the country till we end the death penalty, because he believes young people are the wave of the future, and if they can get it, and boy, well, Linwood, you know a little bit about acting, don't you?
Absolutely. I've performed in a couple stage plays, and that's why I was wondering if you had your theater project here in Delaware. If not, maybe some of you listeners out there can chime in on that, get with Sister Helen. And
then I'll tell you where you go. Go right to the webpage, and the school, any high school, any university, college, community college can do this play. Just go to DMW, that stands for Dead Man Walk, and dmwplay.org. Anyway, what happens in the play is young people. I just saw this at Miami-Dade Community College in Miami 2 nights ago.
Wow.
And they had a packed house. Well, they have a lot of students, 53,000 that go to this community college. And they took all those roles. They were the guard, having to do the killing. They were the mother who had a young daughter killed. They were the mother of the death row inmate. The perpetrator was. They were me, Sister Helen, the nun that got involved in all this, and
Wow.
they were the jury. They were the governor. They were everybody.
And so, with the children working on this project, they get to learn the different aspects and get to see and feel the different people that's involved in executions and stuff. You served as a spiritual advisor to death row inmates and worked with the families of murder victims. Sister Helen, what do you say to family of murder victims?
Yeah,
who support the death penalty in particular?
And the first thing is that I'm the first one to understand that a family who has lost a loved one, the first impulse in almost all of us, and maybe in me too, if somebody killed my mother or somebody I love, the first instinct, like Marietta Yeager said, is I'd like to put my hands around the throat of that man that killed our daughter and squeeze the life out of him myself.
Sure.
Most human beings start there, but then you watch what happens to them as they wait 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. So more and more of them are coming to, this thing doesn't help us. And it doesn't honor our loved one. When New Jersey did away with the death penalty, what was it, 4 years ago?
It's 2007.
2007. 62 murder victims' families testified and just said, don't kill for us, because they realize it just re-victimizes them.
Absolutely. Now, you founded Survive, a murder victim support group. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah. What murder victims' families need, as I discovered, is how many of them said everybody leaves us alone. Nobody wants to talk to us. If I try to talk, like my daughter was killed, I tried to talk to my good friend. She just said, oh, Shirley, that's too painful. You shouldn't talk about that. They didn't have anybody to comfort them and accompany them and help them. So that's why we started Survive. So we have these murder victim support groups. And you can be sure of this, that as Delaware moves away from repealing the death penalty, you're going to have more resources available to really help murder victims' families.
They're already in place. The money can go right towards these survivor programs and theater projects and on and on and on. Tell us, and Abe, you can get in here anytime and help me with these statistics. Just last week, March 11th, Glenn Ford was exonerated right from your home state, Louisiana.
Yeah.
Glenn Ford, he was 64 years old. Can anybody have any idea how many people have been exonerated?
He became the 144th person on the official list. But there's actually more than that. There's a number of people, like any of you who saw the Delaware Theater Company's presentation of The Exonerated, which has finished its run.
Another stage
play. Yes, another stage play. Several of the 6 people sentenced to death who were exonerated after evidence of their innocence came to light are people who took what's called an Alford plea. In other words, they were given the opportunity to plead guilty to a lesser offense and we let you go today, or face the possibility of being reconvicted and resentenced to death. And Kerry Max Cook's one of those people. He faced a 4th trial after being tried and convicted 3 times. In any case, you got a number of people who actually took an Alford plea. Now, that's not the guy that got out Glenn Ford last week. He turns out they railroaded him.
Absolutely innocent.
Absolutely railroaded him. He's the 144th on the official list, and they come out 1, 2, 3 a year sometimes. And there's more, and there's also the fear that a number of people have been executed, and it's only after they're executed that we find out that we had the wrong guy. And
and you know what? Almost all of it, Linwood, is. A lot of people say, "Oh, well, the DNA will get it straight." Like that's a magic bullet. 90% of all these wrongfully, convicted people onto death row was because of prosecutorial misconduct. Because the prosecutors got the evidence, they see the original police report. Like in the case at Glenn Ford, my state, Louisiana, they knew from the beginning there were other suspects. They knew it was on shaky circumstantial evidence, and they wanted to go for it. I mean, people bump themselves up politically. They get points, especially in states that are supposed to be tough on crime like Louisiana. 30 years of that man's life. And I doubt it if he's going to get an apology from the prosecutor's office, much less restitution for losing 30 years of his life.
They sent him away with a $20 debit card.
Wow. So states have executed innocent people.
Yes.
I know. I'm thinking of Mr. Carlos de Luna in Texas. Everybody, it's a famous case of mistaken execution. So we do make mistakes. Police and prosecutors make mistakes. We're all only human. The Supreme Court ruled mentally disabled shouldn't be executed. What's the deal with that? I'm thinking the IQ, where they mark the IQ level at 70 in some states.
Right. Go ahead, Dave.
The problem with it is that the Supreme Court, when they ruled in Atkins versus Virginia, I think it was, they didn't set a IQ level, so they left it up to the states, and states are working around it. But they did prohibit the execution of people with developmental disability, also formerly known as mental retardation, and commonly the IQ level is thought to be about 70. They also prohibited the execution of juvenile offenders, and really the next step is getting rid of it altogether. But those are some of the prohibitions that we've seen most recently.
Yeah, but you know what happens, Linwood, is when a prosecutor really wants that death penalty, and so they're going to get that state examiner to go in there, and they know what the magic number is, see? And so they say, oh, well, he may be a little mentally challenged, but not much. The man, Dobie Williams, that I accompanied for 10 years in Louisiana, he was executed in January of 1999. He had an IQ of 65. But Atkins hadn't happened yet in the Supreme Court. All that time, they were letting people with a very low IQ be executed. So all the luck of the draw or the lottery in this thing is...
And it is a lottery.
Yeah, it is a lottery. And so Dobie, he was very brave. He died bravely. He should never have died.
Do you think the death penalty ever be applied fairly?
No, it's impossible to apply it fairly. And I'll tell you why.
Wow.
First of all, the legislators in the states that make the laws are always a cut above. They're usually not real poor people, usually people with some money. Money's playing more and more a role in who runs for the offices. And generally, the laws they make are to protect their constituents, and their constituents often are people that they want to protect from, quote, the criminal element. And I think that's why it's always going to be harsher punishment against poorer people than people that are not poor. And then what kind of defense you get, see? Absolutely. You get a crackerjack of a lawyer, no matter what you've done, chances are that prosecutor's not going to go after the death penalty and maybe lose. But you're poor, and you're going to have a court-appointed attorney that's overworked, underpaid. So that's why I think it's impossible for us. We're human, we're frail, we got our prejudices and biases. We always have, and I don't think it changes when you're going for the death penalty.
Well, there is true. We do have a lot of work that needs to be done if we are to abolish the capital punishment here in Delaware. Abe, what do you say to the residents of Delaware if they want to help?
Well, you're right. We've got a lot of work to do, but we're almost done. Where we're at right now is the bill has passed in the Senate. It passed last March, and it's currently tabled by the House Judiciary Committee in the House. And we're asking people to call your state representatives, your representative, call them, send them an email, write them a letter on paper, put it in the mail, and ask them to get this bill out of committee to the floor for an up or down vote. That's all we want, is for a floor debate and an up or down vote on this bill. And I'll tell you, a poll conducted by Normington Pets and Associates in February last year showed that 64% of Delawareans believe that life in prison without the possibility of parole should be the punishment for murder, and that just shows that 2/3 of people who live here in Delaware want to see the alternative punishment be the only punishment, the ultimate punishment for murder. That's life without parole. So let me just share with you also the webpage for the campaign is Repeal, DEREPEAL.org. That's Delaware Repeal, DERepeal.org. And you can go there to send an email, to learn more about our events. Sister Helen is speaking tonight in Middletown at the Catholic Church there. It's right off the highway. And then tomorrow night in Rehoboth Beach at Epworth United Methodist Church. And then at Delaware State in Dover on Tuesday evening. And folks who are inclined can come down and be with Sister Helen in the legislature at Ledge Hall on 11:30 on Tuesday. So there's lots of opportunities right now, and Tuesday starts the new session when they'll be back for the next 4 weeks. Every Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we're going to be in Legislative Hall, making sure that people are wearing our buttons and holding our signs, and making sure the legislators know that the people of Delaware want a vote on this bill. And that's all they ask for, is a debate and a vote on the floor of the House, which will allow democracy to prevail. We believe that if that debate happens, enough of those legislators will vote and then send that bill to Governor Markell.
That's right. Senate Bill 19 deserves a vote. You can go down there and meet Sister Helen Prejean, the Catholic nun and author of Dead Man Walking. I'm sure you have your books down there. You can get them signed. Dead Man Walking, an eyewitness account of the death penalty in the United States. She'll be down there with her books, signing them for you right there. Also, I want to give a plug for Dr. Sandra Jones. You can pick up her book, Coalition, Building in the Anti-Death Penalty Movement, Privilege, Morality, Race Relations. That's her first book. Her second book is The Forgotten Victims, Grief and Loss Issues Confronting the Families of Death Row Inmates. You can get both of those books as well as Sister Helen's book on Amazon.com. Go out there and support this effort because Senate Bill 19 deserves a vote. We're running low on time. We have a couple minutes left. Sister Helen, you want to give some anything you want to say to the citizens of Delaware and how they can help you?
Yes, I've been watching the national movement on this for many years now, and I can see the polls now show that we're at an all-time low in people's support in the death penalty. It's down to close to 60%. And then, as they did here in Delaware, when you give people a choice, which do you prefer, the death penalty or life without parole, more and more of a majority of our citizens. I mean, people want to choose life. And just from the point of view of these people who have to be the jurors, have that burden put on you, that you're going to decide if a fellow human being lives or dies. It's too much, really, to ask a human being. So we come to it from human rights. We come to it, those of us who are people of faith, come at it from a faith perspective. What kind of God we believe in? We believe in a God that wants a pound of flesh and a life for life? Or do we believe in a God of love and compassion, the kind of God that Jesus showed us? And it's in Buddhism, too, compassion for all living beings.
You're absolutely right. The question would be, what would Jesus do? You know, you would think that our society would be a little bit more civil, especially since study after study on the death penalty proves that there are flaws on top of flaws in the administration of the death penalty. We are all aware of the lack of fairness when the death penalty is handed down, not to mention the risk of executing an innocent person. So I just want to take a minute and thank you guys, both of you, Sister Helen Prejean and Mr. Abraham Bonowitz. I want to thank you guys so very, very much for being with us today and taking time out of your busy schedule and sharing so much great information. Don't forget, guys, going down to the places that we mentioned downstate in Maryland. Sister Helen is going to be there with her book signing and putting out the message. Remember, Senate Bill 19 deserves a vote.
I just want to say all of the events, if you're listening now, get in your car. Tonight in Middletown, 7 o'clock, in Rehoboth Beach, tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, in Dover, 7 o'clock Tuesday evening. All the details and addresses are at derepeal.org. So check it out, derepeal.org. Take action, contact your legislators, come down and see us.
And I just want to thank you, Linwood. I've been on a lot of radio shows, and I want to say you one man who's done your homework. If ever I've seen somebody who was up on it, you are.
Well, thank you.
And I'd like to just close off by saying I am Sister Helen Prejean, and you're listening to the Linwood Jackson Radio Show on WFAI 1510 AM.
We're coming to a close of this show. We had Sister Helen Prejean came on, and she brought her friend with her, Mr. Abraham Bonowitz. Both are members of the Delaware Repeal Project team, handling a variety of tasks and getting it done, trying to get this Senate bill passed to repeal the death penalty in Delaware. And in closing, I just want to say to all who are working on repeal all over the country, it takes a lot of work. Legislative wins do not just happen. We got to make them happen. There have been a number of recent cases where men have been imprisoned, for a long time, many years, and now are found innocent or exonerated. We know that we have executed a lot of guys and gals who were innocent. But I would say don't give up the fight because in the darkness, for so many, you out there are shining light. In the words of Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King, respectively, be the change that you wish to see in the world. Because in the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. Here on the Linwood Jackson Radio Show, we are committed to giving good information and inspirational content, covering the issues, the solutions, and the fun stuff too, each and every Sunday at 2 to 3 on Delaware's exclusive contemporary radio station, WFAI 1510. Please like our Facebook page, subscribe to us on our YouTube channel, and tweet us on Twitter. See Linwood Jackson. Hey, join us live. Until then, be blessed all week. Ladies and gentlemen, see you then.
Picket lines, a picket sign. Don't punish me with brutality. Talk to me, so you can see what's going on. What's going on? What's going on? I'll tell you what's going on. Ooh.